This is Keys to the Shop, live interviews from the show floor of Coffee Fest Anaheim 2023 Part 2. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DiFiorio. I'm your host for the show. Super glad to have you along for this special live on the show floor of Coffee Fest interview series. This is part 2 of a 2-part series from Anaheim, California, and this is in 2023. I had the pleasure of sitting down with 4 presenters from the lineup of educational content at Coffee Fest and getting to interview them about the subjects that they were presenting on. If you're not familiar with Coffee Fest is a 30-year-old trade show and resourcing event for the specialty coffee retail community. You know, 3 decades is a long time to be a hub of resourcing for the coffee community, for the coffee retail community. Coffee Fest has been foundational to so many people's success over those 3 decades. Visit them at coffeefest.com to learn more about this trade show, where you get to interact with amazing vendors of products and services for your coffee shop, as well as partake in the educational content through lectures, trainings, and workshops, panel discussions, and more. At Coffee Fest, it is all about equipping you and your team for success across many different disciplines and what it takes to be successful in coffee shops. So visit them at coffeefest.com and sign up for Orlando. Actually, it's the last show of the year. They do this 4 times a year, and Orlando is the last show, and you can use the code KEYS, KEYS, to get 50% off your registration when you register under the general admission application, and that will get you 50% off. KEYS is the code to use, and I hope to see you there, because I will be judging latte art. I will be presenting as a lecturer, and it's going to be a great time. So again, go over and visit them and get signed up today, coffeefest.com. All right, everyone. Well, today I am really excited to present to you our last 2 interviews for this series of live interviews on the show floor of Coffee Fest. This time, we are going to be talking with Steve Chang, who is the founder and owner of Copa Vida Cafe, as well as Jon Ferguson of Coffee Tech Central. And we're going to be starting off by talking with Steve Chang, who is the founder and owner of Copa Vida Cafe. That's everywhere from San Diego, Southern California, and Los Angeles. There's 10 shops now, and they are a roastery, as well as being known for great food. Copa Vida Cafe and the sister company, the roasting company, True Beans Coffee Roasters, is really setting a precedent in the area for amazing experiences through coffee. Steve Chang has been in the food service industry for 17 years and loves specialty coffee, and feels a calling to create community through coffee, tea, and great food at these Copa Vida Cafe locations. And today, we're going to be talking with Steve about what it takes to open a great coffee shop and incorporate food in the process. And you're going to get to hear firsthand the passion and the values that Steve brings to the conversation here. Now, this is not live on the show floor. Steve and I didn't really have our schedules coordinate that well during the show, but, you know, we got on a call and we got this recorded. And so Steve presented on food and entrepreneurship at Coffee Fest. And so this conversation is absolutely packed with value from somebody who in the past 17 years, through all different iterations of the food service industry and with 10 cafe locations and a roasting company, has seen some really great success and has been doing so with integrity at the heart of it all. So I hope you all really enjoy this interview with Steve Chang of Copa Vida Cafe. Well, Steve, welcome to Keys to the Shop. Glad to have you here.
Thank you, Chris. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we're catching up a little after the show because, you know, I guess we're both busy people in coffee. But it's good to have this conversation. I got the chance to visit one of your locations, but you have 10 locations right now, right?
Currently, yes.
Yeah.
We have 5 in San Diego County, 4 in Los Angeles County, and we just opened up our first in Orange County.
Wow. And so the question I have to start us off here, and this is the theme of what you were talking about at Coffee Fest too, in terms of opening coffee shops, like how to do that. How did you find yourself in coffee, and what did that look like to take that first step from where you were to, the beginning of the Copa Vida journey, if you will?
Yeah, no, it's a kind of a long story, and I won't bore everybody with it. But to put it kind of in a more succinct way, coffee is my third career, if you will. Out of college, I started out doing nonprofit work in race relations and cross-cultural communications. It was right after the '92 civil unrest. LA riots was another way people referred to it. But because I'm bilingual, Korean American, I was pulled into doing a lot of mediation work and doing a lot of translations in these incredible difficult situation. During that time, I learned to sort of love the idea of community building and realized that a lot of the issues that people were experiencing had to do with a lack of knowledge and understanding of each other's culture and each other's community. And I've always felt like building a place where people can connect over community and become a community together was the solution, the larger solution to a lot of this stuff. And then in the middle of that career, I was running a nonprofit agency called the Asian Pacific American Dispute Resolution Center. And I ended up married to a wonderful partner and woman named Elena. And her family was in the noodle business. And her father, who had created the noodle company 30 plus years ago now, was diagnosed with a form of cancer. He asked that we come and help the business while he was going through treatment. And it was supposed to be like a 2-year thing. And somehow 2 years turned into 12. And I ended up falling in love with the food business. And we made noodles and egg roll skins and wonton skins. We used to joke, you've never heard of us, but you've eaten us. Because if you ever had a Tex-Mex or a Southwestern egg roll somewhere at a national chain restaurant, the skin on that egg roll came from our factory. We served everybody from Panda Express to Spagos and P.F. Chang. So we had a large manufacturing facility in both LA and Chino Hills. And 13 years ago now, we exited from that as a family and decided to figure out what next to do with my life. And it was too late to go back into mediation. But someone told me this wonderful advice that if you pick something you love, it won't feel like work. So pick something you love, and I love baseball and I love coffee. Aside from my family and my faith, those two things were where I found myself spending a lot of my free time on. So I thought, hey, it's too late to get into baseball, but maybe coffee is something I can really jump into. And so I took a year off and just explored coffee for a year. So, in the 12 years and the 10 years before that in mediation, I haven't really had a vacation, but I decided to just take a year and kind of understand what I wanted to do next. And was, kind of praying and asking God for direction, and ended up researching coffee. And that's how I started Copa Vida. And there's so many amazing stories. But the name of the business came from my time. I had spent a week in Seattle, a week in San Francisco, a week in Portland, a week in Boston, a week in Chicago. Anywhere there was a coffee mecca, I went. I even went to spend time in Europe, in Paris and Rome, and even in Australia to really get a full. I used it as an excuse to travel for sure,
Yeah.
but I really wanted to fully understand the coffee chain, and I finally ended up in Costa Rica on a farm, and I spent a month there on a farm picking cherries and processing and doing the whole experience, and learned so much and got so humbled by the knowledge that exists there. And a popular phrase in Costa Rica is pura vida, and that's where the name Copa Vida comes from. It's a play on pura vida, and yeah, it's been an amazing journey since.
Wow. A very succinct way of putting what I imagine is a way more way more in depth, and but I love the idea that this is your third career, and yet the through line of your mediation career and even in manufacturing, providing a supporting element to other people's expressions. I mean, coffee, if anything, is a foundational platform on which life is able to take place. In all your coffee shops, you're still providing something that gathers people and brings understanding and helps facilitate life,
Yeah, absolutely. So when we say, we're Copa Vida, which is cup of life, we're not saying coffee's cup of life. It's just very simply us saying, hey, when you ask a friend to go get a cup of coffee with you, you're not asking, let's get caffeinated. You're saying, let me go share life with you.
Mm,
I have something to talk about. It's the same thing with tea. When my wife says, hey, I'm going out to have tea with my girlfriend, that's not a 30-minute activity. That's 3 hours because
yeah.
they're sharing life. They're over this cup. And the more I traveled, the more I saw how much that was meaningful to people. Coffee, tea, food has a tendency to pull people to a table together in peace. Depending on the culture and history you look at, the more and more you read into it, you realize the traditions about even doing cheers or salute or any of those things has in it a root of people developing a relationship with each other, right? So that idea of helping to build community. Now, I don't believe coffee shops build community, but I believe it's the place, it's the platform where community can be built. Building community is up to the people. But I think as a coffee shop owner and people in coffee, our job is to provide the context for that community to happen. I mean, at a bar, it's not that easy to reach across and say hi to somebody you don't know because you may be picking them up. It might be seen as something intrusive. But at a coffee shop, saying hi next to the person sitting next to you is not only welcome, it's expected. You make eye contact, you say hi, right? So it's a very safe place where people can gather. And that's what I really love about building coffee shops. Yeah.
That's excellent. So you are in this now, and having the experience that you have with touring the world's expressions of coffee and community and all of this, you start your own coffee bar. And I don't I'm not trying to say that this happened, but to me, it feels like the inevitability of that first step is that you don't see exactly what you want to see right away.
Yeah.
Because you've got an unrealistic expectation based on what is a very unique way of viewing coffee. And so it kind of goes into the first step of our conversation here about starting a coffee shop, because today we might not go for a weekend tour in person, but certainly many of us have vision boards and we have Instagram and we're touring a lot. What do we need to really hang on to when we're first starting a coffee shop to keep ourselves motivated that it doesn't all need to happen at the same time right away, and to make good decisions that will actually increase our chances of success?
Yeah, and I think that's a very complex question, and I don't want to turn it into a simple fortune cookie answer. But if there was one thing that I can drill down, because it'll take hours and hours of conversation, but I get that question a lot from people who are interested, because we have a wholesale arm to our business, and so we roast coffee, and so a lot of people who are interested in starting a coffee shop start there at roasteries, talking to people at the wholesale side, trying to see how to start their business. And the number one thing I keep running into again and again is the idea and concept of counting the cost. And people don't count the cost quite as deeply as they should. And for me, I will say that that's what I did too. I didn't count the cost properly. So it took me 3 years to realize, after our first location opened, it took me 3 years to realize what the true cost of opening that coffee shop was. And it's a lot more expensive than people think it is. And I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about passion. I'm talking about time. I'm talking about energy. If you think you're coming in and you're going to be looking really cool behind the coffee bar with an apron and talking to customers all day and having this meaningful, interactions, that's not what running a coffee shop is going to be about. You're going to find yourself with a plunger in your hand, clearing out a toilet. You're going to find yourself dealing and, arguing with your landlord. You're going to find yourself dealing with city permits and processes that you've never even heard of and getting frustrated. So although those things are costs, whether it's opportunity costs or actual dollars cost, and if you don't measure that properly before you dive in, as you hit these things that come at you in the first few years, especially, it's going to cause you to want to leave and stop and quit and give up. And then everything you've done to that point becomes a wasted effort, so to speak. I mean, experience is a never waste to me. So I'm not saying it's all waste, but it becomes very difficult to keep moving forward. So I think that's the critical piece, is truly count the cost of what you're signing up for.
Counting the cost is to me, it feels like this necessary doubt about what the immediate assumption is. Even if you ask somebody, a question like this that we're answering now, I would want to know, well, what does that mean, counting the cost? And you just explained it well. But if you just take everybody's Instagram posts or marketing and at face value, you'll never get to the next level of what you can expect. It feels like you must have had some expectation of this because you were in, I want to say, maybe not a glamorous side of the food industry.
Yeah.
So you knew that there was a little bit of that gritty reality that you would have to deal with in coffee.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that was the benefit of being in a food industry company or food manufacturing business was that I got to see the back end operations of a lot of restaurants, a lot of chains. And regardless of size, whether they were a national chain with 150 locations or a local chain with three, they all had very similar things that they were dealing with in the back. That's not shown on Instagram. That's not shown in your marketing platforms. There's some ugliness. There's some difficulties. There's a lot of issues. I mean, the hospitality and restaurant business is fraught with lawsuits and all kinds of issues in the back, and it made me kind of very eyes wide open walking into this thing. I knew it wasn't going to be just about the wonderful parts of it, and believe me, that's there too. So I don't want to discourage everybody. Like, there's some beautiful moments in a coffee shop, and so I know that's there too. But yeah, it really helped me. And I'm an immigrant. I came when I was 8, and my parents were small business owners all my youth. And I got to see what life was like to do a 7-day operation, right? You're never off, and you're living check to check. You're living, week to week, month to month, one P&L at a time. And I experienced that as well. And the funny part was when I went off to college, I told my parents, I will never do a small business. No, never. I'm not going to touch it. And then this is where I find myself.
Yeah, yeah. As you grow, you eventually won't be, but
Yeah, yeah.
but you're in now 10 locations where the first one had taught you a bunch of lessons about what the coffee industry needs from you to be successful. And I'm curious, on top of counting the cost as you enter in, so you're talking about a personal journey of resiliency to grow with the business. Leading people in the midst of that is also another challenge because they too are experiencing that same kind of a reality. Is that slightly different? Like, how have you found yourself growing as a leader, and what advice do you have for people to really knock that out of the park?
I don't think I know how to answer that from here's the solution and here's what I did. I'm still figuring that out. Our company started with 12 employees, including myself and my wife. We're now 89, 90 something at last count. And it fluctuates because people are at our size now with 10 locations. There's somebody always leaving and somebody always coming in. So there is a little bit of fluctuation there. But and the spread we have from San Diego to Los Angeles means some folks I see once every other week or once a month because of scheduling and shifts and all of that. And that was really awkward for me because the first 4 years I got to meet everybody. I knew their names. I knew their background a little bit, maybe even know what they were studying at school, or knew a family member of theirs or their spouse or their girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. But these days, I struggle just to really know their names and at least have something that tells me that, hey, I mean, I used to remember everybody's favorite coffee. I can't even, I don't even, know that anymore. Like, I don't even ask the question anymore. So it's a very different thing as your company grows to what it means to stay connected. So you get a little bit of an imposter syndrome feeling as a leader, right? Because when it was smaller as a leader, it was very much, stayed with my people. There was a direct connection to the people I worked with. And now there's a little bit of a distance there. But I think the hard part about leadership that I would maybe share that I've learned as a hard lesson is don't make too many promises. Try your best to live up to a standard. Try your best to live up to a set of goals that you might have for yourself, a set of values that you try to embrace. But know also that you need grace, that as a leader, it's a very lonely place to be. And it's really hard to live up to the hype you create for yourself or the image that you want for yourself. And it can be really draining to try to hold that line while running a business and while trying to be financially responsible. So I would love to be able to say, I want a place where everybody gets great education and training. There's a upward pathway for everybody, and we're all going to make tons of money. That's not reality. Right? Things like the pandemic happen and really completely shocked your system, and you lose 50 employees in a single day. Right, so those things are reality, right? And the hurricane recently hit Southern California, and the mess it created for us just on an operational level. You know, you can't control those things as a leader. So be very careful about the promises you make, but be very clear about the goals you have. Yeah.
Why would maybe you and how would you guess others get into this situation where they're making a lot of promises? What motivates us to make tons of promises to people?
More than any other industry that I've experienced, including nonprofit, coffee is very aspirational. There's very few of us that go into the specialty coffee world saying, I want to get rich, right? And I've met plenty of people in business who aren't shy about that, right? You go to Wall Street, and I'm being stereotypical there, but even outside of that, it's very clear. I want to go and make money. That's what a business is. I provide a product and a service. I receive funds for that product and a service, and I make profit, and that's business. If I don't make profit, I don't have a business, but my goal is to generate profit. But in specialty coffee, almost everybody I've run into, including myself, we have these aspirations for impacting things around us and being part of something that's more meaningful than just turning a buck. Impact on a community, impact on a human being, impact on an employee, impact on the farmer, impact on the environment, impact in social justice, impact in whatever. In the culture wars, there's always something other than just serving coffee and making a buck off of serving that coffee. And people will start coffee shops in the specialty coffee world. And I think that's what leads to promises, right? I'm going to promise that our coffee cup is going to be sourced with coffees that haven't hurt anybody, that it's beneficial to the farmer, it's beneficial to the customer, it's beneficial to my employees, it's going to be good for everybody. But can you really live up to that practice? Do you really know where that bean comes from? Do you know whether or not that farmer uses child labor or is cruel to his pickers during season because they're not regular employees, they're migrant workers? Do you know that they're not using chemicals? Have you been to that farm? No. And anybody will tell you that even if you go, you're not going to see. When you visit, they're not putting out their ugly out there. They're making sure everything looks great, right? So, making promises like, hey, we're only going to bring in this kind of coffee, or we're only going to serve this, or our shop is going to be where we really lift up our employees. Not everybody who comes and works for you is going to be the kind of person that you want to lift up. There are some bad apples that come in. There are people who come in and ruin your culture. There are people who come in and make things difficult for everybody else, and they need to be let go. And, saying to yourself that I'm going to have this wonderful community of workers that everybody just gets along and does wonderful things all day long, that's a promise you can't deliver on.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, we have a lot of expectations when we enter in from all different angles, and we try to please all of those different impact points. And it just makes me feel like you easily get bruised by all that impact,
Sure.
Just maybe choose a couple of things that you can deliver on at a lower level to get closer to something aspirational. Yeah, and I like your phrase, giving grace to yourself, your people. Together creating coffee, and that's really what this is. And you can create great things for sure, but it'll take time. One of the complications that we enter into when we have coffee is the desire of our customer that changes from day to day based on marketing or just innate need. One of those needs is food. We see this a lot more. I used to be as a barista in the early 2000s. And if you had food in your coffee bar, you were a sellout, that kind of thing. But now it's everywhere. And I'm so glad because, I get hungry and I want coffee and food. And it's not just enough these days to have very, very, it's edible kind of food. You should have pretty decent food. And you all do this and do it well. So I'm curious about, as we pursue our shop in running great operations, how do we integrate food into this?
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult question because I want to just be clear that I didn't start off saying I'm going to have an amazing food program. I fell into that accidentally. I made a classic mistake. This is what I mean by making sure you know how to count the cost. But I fell in love with a space before I had a business plan that fit it. So I fell in love with this old building, historical building in Old Town Pasadena, 4,700 square foot space. And it was an existing wine bar that we converted into a coffee shop. But for some reason in my head, I thought I could make that happen. But then I started running numbers after I signed the lease, mind you, and realized that I'm going to have to sell a
Hmm.
big, huge amount of coffee in order for me to make rent because it's a very high rent and high square footage location. So the only way to solve that problem was I got to sell food because I got to get the transaction value up. So from $4 a transaction to $14 a transaction, I need at least $10 more a transaction in order for me to be able to survive here. And so I was kind of forced into thinking about food. But then I also remember during my travels that in places outside of North America, coffee shops are not just for coffee. There's a lot of other things going on. In Australia, it's expected to have beautiful food along with your coffee in any coffee shop you go into. It's not uncommon. It's actually, if you just did coffee, you would be the uncommon coffee shop. So the idea of incorporating food into our program became something that became a reality for us early on. So all that to say, I started designing, whether by purpose or by accident, designing food into the spaces that I was building. And that allowed it to be very much part of our building block. So it was pre-planned. So if you're planning for food, then you have to be very clear about, and this is where my time in the noodle business really helped. You have to really be clear about what kind of food you're serving. There are these categories for purpose. Are you fast food? Are you quick service? Are you gourmet? Are you trying to be Michelin star? What are you trying to be? Are you going to be specializing in one thing and be known the world over for your amazing breakfast burritos or your avocado toast? Or are you trying to do a brunch menu? Or are you trying to do, something that's grab and go, that's easy, made somewhere else? You have to know your purpose behind it, right?
Mm.
It has to
Yeah.
be a part of thinking. It can't be just something you go, well, I don't know what to do. I need something, so I'm going to buy some bread and avocado and call it a day. You can't do that. That'll hurt your business. That'll hurt your brand. That'll hurt your employees because your baristas are going to say, I don't want to do this. On this side, I'm supposed to be doing craft, and on this side, I'm doing crap, and I can't,
Yeah.
be both people at the same time, right? So you really want to kind of figure out what your ethos is going to be along with food before you enter. The other thing is counting the cost again. Make sure you have what it takes. I know so many people who started a food program without realizing that the health department was going to come down on them because the stuff they were adding was not part of the health department, your original menu that you applied with. So if you didn't apply for your health permit with food preparation being a part of your permit, well, you start buying induction burners and start cooking, you're going to get cited because you're not rated for that. So you need to kind of go through the process of understanding that. You also want to, in that, kind of start thinking outside the box of, do I really have to cook everything? Right. So if this is an issue of convenience, or this is an issue of I too want to add something for my customers, but I don't have the space, then you do need to look at, relationships with ghost kitchens, getting it delivered fresh from a local bakery, a partnership with a restaurant across the street or around the block, something that says, hey, because I don't have the resources, I'm going to go to the people that do and create a partnership. Yes, your margin goes down, but so does your costs. You're managing your initial investment. So whether it's going to be high on the investment side with kitchen equipment and starting inventory and smallware and everything that comes with cooking, or you're going to have a high in, like, because you buy from somewhere else and you resell it. Yes, that's going to work, may work, but you got to make sure it's on brand. But the other thing is that it's not as exciting because somebody else is doing the work. Well, you want that excitement, you're going to have to pay the price, right? Otherwise, you have to find something that makes economic sense. And if it doesn't pencil out, don't do it. Don't do the thing where you go, oh, I'll make it and hopefully people will come and eat it. That's not going to work either. And I'm not saying that because I knew that going in. I'm saying I learned that the hard way that doesn't work.
I see. So it feels like we should push ourselves toward doing something quality, even if it means that we have to find alternative solutions rather than just not having food at all.
Right. So an example would be if you're selling your coffee saying we handcraft everything, we make our syrups in-house. Every pour was done by a kettle, not by a machine. We do the strong approach, to making sure that the beans are sourced properly, that the milk is amazing, that it's done, environmentally safe. You do all of that in front, and then in the food section, you go, "Oh, we're going to heat it up for you in our microwave and then serve it to you on a paper plate." There's a dissonance there. And your customer base is going, I don't understand. And what it does is that your brand goes from, wow, that's a craft place down to starts to just diminish. And your food program could pull your coffee program down, right? That's why so many places, it doesn't feel like it's right. It feels like an afterthought. And just because you don't have a kitchen doesn't mean you can't have food. But you got to have a story. Then build a story. Go talk to a local baker. Go talk to a local company. Find out what their story is, because just like you, they have a passion too. And if your passions align and they're all about that perfect breakfast burrito and they wake up 4 a.m. every day to ensure that the tortillas are handmade, and if they have that story and you connect to that, yes, it's their story, but it's a collaboration, and you put that forward, then there is something to that says, hey, this is like, and our brands are aligned, and we can work together, right? So yeah, you can't go, I'm really serious about this, geisha from Panama, and I'm going to charge you $20. And we also have cereal top donuts here for you. Like, it's not going to resonate together, right? It's got to work together. Yeah.
Sure. And I feel like there's this universal value of intentionality when you're in specialty coffee. So I like what you mentioned about like connecting to other people's stories. Even if it's not word for word your story, there's an intentionality there. There's a deeper meaning, and that itself is enough of a familiar thing to people that it would be more successful than, the bagel bites that you get from Costco or whatever. Well, there's so much more we could talk about. But I really appreciate you sitting down to talk with us about coffee shops and food programs and just the ethic of, especially these ideas of counting the cost and intentionality and grace for yourself. I think these are so incredibly important. If you wanted to leave us with just one thing here as we wrap up to help the entrepreneur of the future just stay the course, what would it be?
A lot of times I think I've been taught, look forward into the future, see the mountain you want to climb, or the place where you're going to plant your flag and say I succeeded, and keep your eye on that, right? And chase that. And I think after 10 years of trying to do a lot of that, I realized actually that's kind of what caused me to get lost a lot of times, or not see some of the barriers that were thrown up in front of me, and I just couldn't see it because I was too busy staring at the future. I think where I've shifted these days is to look more at where you came from, look at what you've been able to build, comparison to where you were 10 years ago, but look around you more closer to where you are, and understand all the people in the community that you do have around you, and have that be sort of the driving force behind your desire to grow, or your desire to do better, or your desire to expand, whatever it is. But that should lift you up versus something up front, because what I find is that flagpole keeps being moved to different places when I look too far ahead. So knowing that you're on firm foundation is more important than the change you want to make in the world being clear in your head, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Steve. Where can we learn more about Copa Vida and stay in touch with you?
Yeah, our website, obviously, copa-vida.com. Our social media, we answer questions and anything that's thrown there. And the best way to learn about us is come by one of our shops and see for yourself, and see all the mistakes and stupid things that we've done, as much as all the great things that we've done as well. So, yeah.
Love it. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Chris. It was fun.
Well, okay. I hope that you all enjoyed that conversation. And, Steve is just a great example of somebody whose pursuit of, something beyond the transactional element of coffee helps to create the success of the business itself, because business in coffee is about connection. And that connection is what makes what we sell valuable. And in coffee shops, it is just true that the experience is largely going to be based on the way people feel about how they're treated, about what's behind the brand, what's behind, the intentionality behind the food and the coffee and everything else. And so if you can scale your values and do so with integrity, intentionality, and keep these things at the forefront of your thinking and relationships, then you're going to see more success than if you had not and were just chasing trends or just trying to expand for the sake of expansion. And Steve is a great example of this. And so a huge thank you to Steve for joining us on the show. If you are interested in more information about Copa Vida Cafe, go ahead and look them up, Copa_Vida on Instagram, and also check them out at copa-vida.com. That's where you can buy coffee, learn about their locations, contact them, and everything else. That's kind of the hub. So copa-vida.com is the place to go. And again, thank you, Steve, for your wisdom and insights and example. So now we are going to be interviewing Jon Ferguson. Jon Ferguson is the owner of Coffee Tech Central, which is a company that specializes in coffee and espresso equipment sales, training, and consulting services. Jon has been in the industry for quite a long time. We're talking about 2005, maybe even before, but working as a barista, a grain buyer, a manager, quality control specialist, roaster, and now someone who is helping you have your equipment stay up and running, but not just that, run well. Someone who's helping you assess things that you need to do to keep your equipment tip-top, and purchasing the right equipment is part of that conversation with Jon. One of the things that he was presenting on was buying used equipment, and this is such an exciting topic. It's exciting to me. Let's just put it that way, because it's a conversation that you find entrepreneurs having all the time regarding equipment. We want to save money. We want to buy used equipment, but there's a bigger conversation to be had regarding how you are to select used equipment, if you should select used equipment, and all of the points in between. And Jon does a fantastic job of breaking this down for us on the show floor in Anaheim. And so if you've ever thought, gosh, how do I go forward buying used equipment? What are the ins and outs, and what should I look out for? And when is the right time to do it, and when is it a bad idea to do it? This is the conversation for you, and Jon is the person to tell you. So really am a big fan of Jon's work, and is a good friend in the coffee industry, and I'm really excited that we got a chance to talk to him. So here we go. Here's my conversation about buying used equipment with Jon Ferguson of Coffee Tech Central. Jon, hey.
How's it going?
Good. How are you? Welcome.
I'm good. You're good. Thanks for having me here. How you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. We were just talking about your storied past in coffee and how you've done so many things, and now you're on the tech side of things. You've been around the industry since when did you first start in coffee?
2005.
Okay.
I was already kind of starting some small businesses in Nebraska. One of them was a record shop. And after running a record store for a while, it didn't feel completely fulfilled. It was like there's still this urge to get back to my undergraduate degree in anthropology and kind of stay connected with my Peace Corps experience. And I thought, well, I really want to get into coffee. So I packed up and we moved to Seattle, and I landed a job at this really high-end specialty coffee company called Zoka.
Yes.
And back in the day, it was an interesting place to be.
Yeah, brand new back then.
Yeah, all barista competitions, and everybody's getting all dressed up, and all these like barista magazine, and
all the aprons and
these little baseball
wooden
cards
plaques and stuff. Yeah. The cards, the trading cards that you just showed me,
which you are on,
which I was on.
You have one of those. I need to have you sign that. Thank you.
From there, your career evolved into what?
Oh my gosh. Well, after a very special cupping with the green buyer at that time at Zoka, obviously it was my light bulb moment of, this is something special. It's something I've never really thought about with coffee before, is the differentiation of flavor and taste. And so I took that back to Nebraska, and I was a roaster. I started a roasting company for about 5 years.
Yeah.
That 24/7 lifestyle of running a coffee roasting company with a coffee shop was not quite my speed, so I decided to kind of get into pursuing a green coffee purchasing, and you just really wanted to get into the world of sourcing coffee.
Yes.
So
Okay.
I kind of followed that path for a while with other companies.
So you've kind of explored all facets of the industry through your career.
Yeah.
And getting into the tech side of things, you're familiar with, I mean, these are just the tools of our trade, and your usage of them throughout the years has led to your success. You've seen machines evolve. You've seen how success can be brought on by bad equipment versus, good equipment, and everywhere in between.
Yeah.
You're presenting this weekend on this subject, right?
Yeah, tomorrow. Came up with a topic, buying new or used. That is the question.
Yes.
And that was my short of it. Keep it simple. Also, it's an important topic that I often get questions about. Like, hey, John, I'm looking for a really good deal. I found something on, the marketplace online, and what do you think of it? And so tomorrow I'm going to show you, during the presentation, horror stories of all of these blown heat exchangers and, hard water deposits inside of boilers where, a lot of these used pieces of equipment have not been serviced properly, and it's like when you buy a used car, would you ever even kick the tires or open up the hood or try to give it a test drive? Yes, right?
Oh, of course.
Just looking at an espresso machine online, and the seller is going to tell you what they want to hear, what you want to hear. So in a sense, it's really great to have a second opinion.
Yeah.
And if you don't have one, you're taking a very big risk.
I hear that a lot too on, you go onto boards on Facebook or places like that people are like, hey, everyone, this seems like a good price. What do you think about this machine? Yeah. And that is this mentality of, I'm going to try to save money on this piece of equipment, which is a very important piece of equipment for your shop.
Probably one of the most important, right? I mean, let's cut to the chase here. Without that, you can't make espresso.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, you're
Exactly.
done.
Yeah.
Here.
So good point.
Yeah, I mean, so how do you dash people's hopes and dreams with tact in saying, do you just reflexively say just buy new all the time? Are there good used machines that you can buy?
There's a range, I think, in a lot of the ways that other products are sold, like cars or bicycles. There's always the good, better, best. There's that entry level. I'm not going to name names here, but there's the more affordable options.
Yes.
And then you get more bells and whistles and a little heavier quality built. But at the end of the day, there are some opportunities out there where you can find some used equipment that has been serviced well and looked over by professionals. So a part of the reason why I'm here is to promote the value of your local coffee service company, if you have one, if there are even those in your community that can help assist you in that process of finding good equipment. So like if you have a local coffee service company and they're doing a lot of the service tech for your company, ask them, do you have any used equipment, or what do you sell new? And if they do have anything used, they're professionals. They've probably had the skill and the ability to know whether or not they're going to have a used espresso machine that's in good, decent condition for you to sell. And they might even, throw in a 30-day warranty or have the parts.
When you look to see if you have a local tech that sells used machines, and you do have one, what kind of things should they have done to the machine in order to guarantee, or as close to guarantee as possible, that it's not going to break through negligence? What's the stuff that we should be looking for?
Well, that's a great question. There are a lot of hydraulics and electronic parts and systems to the machine that need to be tested and looked at. If you are from a part of the country where there's a lot of hard water, you have to look at the thermal loop and the heat exchanger inlet tubes. And there's a lot of things that you need to double check before I would resell that machine.
Oh, right.
All the brew valves, pressure release valve, the anti-vac valves, both the steam ones, they probably rebuild the steam ones. I usually just kind of go through the entire machine to make sure that it's up and running properly.
Okay. Do you recommend things like, I know some people like dip the boiler in acid? and clean it out like that. Or
Yeah, well, that can be a dangerous thing because it kicks up a lot of debris, and that debris can then get stuck into your valves, like your solenoid valves.
I see.
And sometimes it clogs, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on how bad it is and how that technique's done. So that's not always one of the standard practices that you would do, but it's definitely more complicated than just kind of filling it up with acid and flushing it out. But that,
sure.
It kind of depends.
So you have to make sure that there are people who are very detail oriented. And I imagine you'd probably, if you're going to buy a used piece of equipment, probably not good to get it off of eBay where it's just liquidated from a long closed restaurant.
Oh my gosh, that's the worst. Oh my gosh. Can I tell you a horror story?
Please.
Okay. Guy comes in and he has already been to a coffee service company that I know, that I respect and I admire. They're these mentors. They've been in the business much longer than me as a coffee service company.
Right.
He has put $850 into refurbishing the machine that he bought from someone online. It wasn't working properly, so he took it to a different coffee service company. They went through the machine. They replaced as much as they could. They were about an $850 bill, and it still was not fixed. They replaced most of the coffee brew valves, also the dual gauge. There's so many things wrong with this. And they just kind of called it quits and said, sir, this machine's probably not worth fixing. So he brings it to me. And he says, that other service company, they kind of looked through it and they said, if we can't help you, maybe John can. So they sent it to me. I called that service company and I asked them, hey, what'd you do to the machine? And so we had another conversation about it. And they said, yeah, it looks like it might have been frozen.
Oh.
And when a machine gets frozen, water expands. And when water expands, it busts everything through that machine.
Yes.
So the water in the boiler kept on filling. The water in the sight glass would not stop and would just keep on overfilling. So I took off the side of this heat exchanger boiler system and found out that the heat exchangers on the inside, one of them in the back had been split because ice basically created a crack in the boiler.
Yeah.
And that was several $100s more in labor and several $100s more in parts. And that was disassembled at that time. So I would have to still put in a couple more hours of labor to refurbish it. But at that point, it just wasn't worth it. And he spent $3,500 on that machine before the repair cost. So he was about $4,300 into this used machine that was basically for parts at that point. So I would say that's the worst case scenario.
That, is not something that saved you any time, added heartache, I'm sure, and stress.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
To the owner. And at the end of it, it's not like it's a new machine.
No. Yeah.
It's just able to make coffee, but for how long?
Well, that couldn't even make coffee for a minute.
Yeah.
So yeah,
so
and it's kind of a sad thing. Well, he could have, and I would suggest everybody out there just get in touch with a local coffee service company, see what they have available before you pull the trigger and buy anything. Just talk to someone that's a coffee service technician and get their opinion. They're going to be a little bit more open to discussing your options because they're not one manufacturer. They're not one brand. They have that freedom to be more customized with you to say, like, what are your needs? Are you interested in super automatic, just push button, walk away? Do you want it barista facing? Do you want it customer facing? Do you want volumetric, or are you one person shop where you can manually, have a lot of different coffees you want to play with? So you want to do volume or pressure profiling, right? And that way you can have a better conversation and not feel like you're being sold one brand all the time.
Well, that's an interesting point in that we don't like being sold, and so people enter these things like a used car dealership, and they feel like they need to push in order to for pride. If you look at the numbers and even just think about the things you talked about, it's not about pride, it's just practicality, about being pragmatic. Like, is this the biggest thing in your cafe and the most important thing? Yes. Is it you get what you pay for? Probably. Right? I mean,
100%.
So it feels like this is an emotional thing for people. A lot of people that come to me for any kind of like coaching, and they come to you for repairs or purchasing equipment, they're thinking, I don't know what I'm doing yet. Like, especially new operators coming from other industries. So it's hard for them to be confident.
Yeah.
But I guess you would encourage them to just slow down long enough to explore the facts and not let the emotion just drive their impulse purchases.
Yeah, and reach out to people who have been doing it for a long time, like yourself, and like also coffee service companies where they have to do this day to day, day in and day out. They have some good information, and they want like myself and a lot of people that I know, we're part of this thing called the service layer, and there's a lot of independent coffee service companies that are participating. We have a lot of this dialogue where we are all out to make sure that you are successful as a business, because we don't want to come back and fix that machine again, because we have a lot to do.
Yeah.
So we try to get it done right the first time. We want to make sure that you're set up properly. And the biggest thing that most people look over is what you can buy a machine for $30,000 or $6,000 brand new, and hard water will kill them both just as quickly. So we talk a lot about, okay, you got a great espresso machine, but let's not overlook the quality of your reverse osmosis system or your water filtration system. Now, if you live in Seattle or Portland, maybe you just need a taste odor filter. But if you're in Nebraska or possibly Los Angeles, you've got a lot more to think about than just your espresso machine. So I'd say, consultation, it's worth every penny. I would say talking with a service company and what they have to offer, and also reach out to your manufacturer. Like, if you want a specific type of machine, go for it. Have those good conversations. Ask them, like, how does this perform?
So in terms of using a used piece of equipment, the service on that used piece of equipment, is it any different in terms of preventative maintenance, in terms of frequency and things that you would need to plan for, maybe more money on the back end?
That's a great question. I wasn't sure if I was going to say that, because I've tried to not say that's a great question, but that was a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to plan for that. I mean, it really depends on, like, how used is that piece of equipment? Was that shop open for a year? Was it a brand new piece of equipment when they bought it? Does it have a service record? Like, just like Carfax with a used vehicle, I'd love to see this industry. And we're also, like, thinking about this, having conversations like, how do you slap a QR code on it so you can see its service record?
Wow.
And that would answer that question. Like, what kind of service has it had? A lot of companies are trying to implement this, like manufacturers within their own companies, but I would love to see this happen where we can have that more detailed information, and more data the better. But in general, you don't really know what you're getting yourself into when you buy a used espresso machine online from a private seller. Even someone like a coffee service company that's ambitious to get rid of a piece of equipment, there's a lot of trust. Make sure you kind of do your research and, vet those who you work with, even in that area. So,
and it's easy to see sometimes with the used equipment what that great piece of equipment could have been used only a little bit on a bar, but if it lasted for a year, a lot can go wrong in a year. So time isn't necessarily right.
You're correct. I'll just say, brand new machine, less than a year old, in a very hard water area of Nebraska. They did have a water filtration system set up, but it was just a softener. Within less than a year, their intake valve, the tube that goes through the heat exchanger, that cold water that goes then into the thermal loop, where that cold meets hot, collected and basically caused a complete compaction and a restriction of water to flow through there. So it started to spit out steam. And it was basically, I had to take out the heat exchanger tube and clean it out, and less than a year old. So, and if they would have sold that, it would have been a headache. So,
and that feels like a mystery part. Like, there's some things you look at a machine and you say, okay, look at all the dents on that. And like, it's, the group head, especially. Everyone looks at the group head, it's caked and nobody ever backflushed it and that kind of stuff. But the internal components are the mystery pieces, right? And they show up at the worst times.
Yeah, and they're usually the hardest to fix, especially if you're busy on the bar. But that's where this service layer really comes in handy, where newbie techs like myself, and I'm not kidding anybody, I'm brand new at this. I've been doing it for a couple of years, but I'm still learning quite a bit. That network of professionals that have been doing this for a very long time have been that great tool for other techs to kind of help troubleshoot those complications. So again, I'm just throwing it at the service layer. If you do buy used equipment, or even if you buy new equipment, it's really important to have someone that is on your side. Yeah. And the best way to get them on your side is to buy new equipment or even used equipment through a local coffee service company.
Okay.
Yeah. That's my message. I'm going to drill that in.
Nice. Yeah. Don't try to be cute. Use service layer.
Yeah, just, work with the local guys. I mean, it's, or the companies or whatever, yeah.
There's a lot of them out there. Yeah. I mean, not as many as there should be, but...
And they're busy. They're very busy. And you're right. There's not enough techs to go around.
And they're busy probably because we're not really doing preventative maintenance the way we should
and year to year, growth to growth. I mean, like, there are more espresso machines being sold every year, but there are not more coffee service technicians at the same rate being made. So the SCA has done a lot of work with, launching their coffee tech program to do some training. So
that's great. I mean, in its importance, because obviously back to the idea of this is a piece of equipment that will either ruin or help you get profitable. It's a huge investment. You got to take it seriously. And building relationships feels like a good idea. It's like if you find a service provider and you can have a relationship with them where they can maybe do your PM or they can be your consultant in that process, getting into that, it's like finding a good family doctor.
100%. And that's hard. Finding a new primary care physician in a new company or in a new state, it's daunting and it's difficult, but it's extremely important. And once you are part of that family, of that service company, doesn't always work out. But, you got to at least try and maintain those relationships. So, all right.
Well, I am looking forward to hearing how your talk goes tomorrow on this. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people who have already bought a used piece of equipment in your class.
Yeah, and I'll say like, hey, my other suggestion is if you bought a piece of used equipment, you might want to buy one more just as a backup.
So, that's good.
Yeah.
Jon, it's been great to talk to you. Where can we learn more about your company and what you do?
Yeah, just go to coffeetechcentral.com. And there should be a lot of information there about what we're doing. In my area, I sell new and sometimes used coffee and espresso equipment, but also, really involved with the service layer to help people find their local service companies. So if you need help finding that person in your area or that company in your area, please contact us, fill out the form that's online, and the service layer will be in touch.
So that's awesome. Yeah. And you're located where?
Right now, we're in the Midwest in Nebraska.
So you are in Nebraska right now?
At this moment, yes.
Okay, at this moment. Yes. Right. Awesome. Thanks, Jon.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right.
All right, everybody. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that. And, the theme of this conversation seems to be you gotta do your homework and figure out the backstory for what it is you're purchasing. And, the psychology oftentimes with buying used equipment is almost like we're getting away with something. The expediency of buying used equipment kind of comes part and parcel with the savings of money. Almost implied is that there's a savings of thought, when in fact, actually, the opposite is true. I mean, whatever money you saved by buying used equipment, I hope you spent at least 5 times as much dollar per thought ratio, I suppose, in the kind of investigation into the history of the machine and all of that stuff, so that you can at least know what the machine has been through and whether or not you're going to buy a lemon. And Jon brings up such a great point that, you've got to trust the people that you're buying it from. So it's not enough to buy it from a individual operator, but somebody, like Jon or other companies who are, refurbishing and certifying used equipment have a little bit more robust protocols and maybe even warranty extensions and guarantees that are going to be helpful for your business because, there's a lot of liability here. It's a big decision. So enter thoughtfully, enter with caution and with a mind to study what it is you are bringing onto the heart of your business. And a huge thank you to Jon for joining us. If you're interested in more information about the services that Jon provides through Coffee Tech Central, all you need to do is go to coffeetechcentral.com and you can find all you need to know about services and sales and other things that are going to help you run a great coffee bar and do so with quality equipment as the tool that you use to make it happen. So again, that is coffeetechcentral.com, and a big thank you again to Jon Ferguson. Now, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback about today's episode or any episode of the show, feel free to reach out, chris@keystotheshop.com. If you're interested in Keys to the Shop consulting and coaching, you want some one-on-one coaching for you to help elevate your quality, people, and operations, I am available to help you do just that. chris@keystotheshop.com, and we'll set up a free discovery call to talk about what you need and how I might be able to help you. So thank you, everybody, for joining me on these episodes. Don't forget to check out coffeefest.com. Use the code KEYS, KEYS, to get 50% off general admission when you sign up to go to Orlando this year in 2023. And that's it. Thank you, everyone, so much. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.